Here's a vital truth most people overlook. Mental speed is irrelevant if you're heading in the wrong direction. You can be incredibly quick, highly motivated, and still fall short against someone who moves with deliberate, calibrated thought. Why? Because most minds today aren't slow. They're misaligned. They're shaped by years of emotional noise, inherited anxieties, and outdated ways of thinking. That's why this approach isn't about raw speed. It's about sharpening your mental trajectory. 1. Perceptive clarity. The discerning mind strips away superficial narratives, not because it's emotionless, but because it's allergic to distortion. We've been conditioned to think in stories. I was betrayed. She abandoned me. They ruined everything. But these aren't facts. They're dramatized interpretations. Your mind often craves drama because it feels vivid, but vividness isn't clarity. It's often just static. The clearer mind doesn't say, "I was hurt." It observes. An expectation shifted. It doesn't claim, "They used me." It notes. A pattern of interaction repeated. Do you see the difference? One traps you in an emotional loop. The other opens the door to understanding and growth. Most people don't truly want truth. They want a story where they're either the hero or the victim. But true intelligence isn't about being the main character. It's about stepping back to see the pure structure of reality. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clean. No fog, no fiction, just the pure signal. When you stop narrating, you start noticing. In that stillness, data speaks. Suddenly, you realize you weren't rejected, you were redirected. You weren't betrayed, you were misaligned. You weren't cursed, you were taught. This is about seeing without illusion. Your ego may resist. It wants to be the star of a dramatic film, even if it means staying in discomfort. But the astute mind knows better. It doesn't need a story to feel whole. It just needs truth. Unedited, unfiltered, unromanticized. Because the moment you release the narrative, you don't just see reality more clearly, you move through it with fluidity and purpose. 2-point cognitive rhythm mapping. Most people don't realize their brain isn't just thinking. It's rushing toward a conclusion, toward the comfort of "I know." But insight isn't measured by how fast you reach an answer. It's measured by how long you can remain in the quiet tension of the unknown without flinching. Cognitive rhythm is your internal gauge, not to rush thought, but to observe it. You track how quickly your mind tries to end the discomfort of uncertainty. You examine the micro moments where your brain hurries to define, to label, to resolve. Instead of indulging that speed, you gently slow it down. You feel the urge to label someone as wrong, and you wait. You feel the impulse to defend your perspective, and you pause. You learn to expand the gray zone. The insightful mind isn't obsessed with being correct. It's dedicated to being precise. And precision demands time. Time to absorb patterns, time to see subtleties, time to let understanding unfold rather than forcing it out of urgency. The novice fills silence with opinion. The expert observes the silence for deeper insights. You stop reacting to the loudest idea and start noticing what hasn't been expressed. That space between initial thought and clear conclusion is where genuine insight begins. This isn't indecision. It's deliberate completeness, a conscious refusal to rush the mind's natural process. You train yourself to be the last to offer a definitive statement, not to be passive, but to be truly accurate. While the world often values quick talkers, it quietly respects those who think like skilled artisans, measured, sharp, and intentional. When your cognitive rhythm becomes more deliberate, you don't just respond better, you begin to perceive what others can't even see. For 3, perspective reversal training. Most minds follow established lines of thought. They adopt frameworks and then defend them rigidly. But the truly insightful mind does something different. It reverses its initial instincts. When the world suggests, "This is success," you ask, "What if that's limitation in disguise?" When they say, "They're confident because they dominate," you ask, "What if true confidence is the ability to listen and understand deeply, yet still shape the conversation?" This isn't about being contrary. It's about cultivating cognitive inversion, a mental agility that doesn't cling to patterns, but interrogates them, explores them, and rebuilds them from different angles. Here's the secret. Intelligence isn't just about creating. It's also about deconstructing. You take the accepted path and explore alternatives. You take a belief and turn it inside out until it either clarifies or shifts. You take an assumption and blend it with its opposite until it either transforms or, because behind many narratives is an ego striving for significance. It wants to be the victim, the hero, the martyr, the misunderstood one. But genuine insight doesn't want to feel right. It wants to see what's true. So you gently extract the storyline, and all that's left is the core information. She left, that's all. You made a decision. It had a particular outcome. That's it. No lingering shame, no hidden symbolism, no dramatic monologue running in the background. Just clean data, just facts. When you process reality without an overlay of narrative, you stop reliving perceived pain and start refining your perception. Because stories aren't just illusions, they can be repetitive loops. They can trap you in cycles of self-reinforcement. Over time, you begin to believe your own interpretations, and that's when your vision becomes limited. But when you shed the narrative layer, you don't become dispassionate. You become precise. You're not detaching from genuine emotion. You're detaching from emotional fiction. Only then can you truly see what unfolded, not just how it felt, but what it fundamentally was. That's not numbness. That's psychological clarity. 5. Empathetic resonance control. Your nervous system wasn't solely built for individual sovereignty. It was built for connection within a group. You naturally resonate with others' stress, reflect their anxiety, and absorb their tension. Not because you're weak, but because evolution hardwired your neurons to align with the emotional atmosphere around you. That's why you might feel drained around unmotivated individuals, why a wave of anxiety can sweep through a room silently, or why one person's frustration can ignite your own. It's not purely spiritual, it's neurological. Mirror neurons are tiny biological pathways, constantly observing others and subtly reflecting their states within you. But here's what the average mind rarely explores. You can consciously manage this resonance. The highly perceptive individual doesn't just react slower, they can maintain their emotional center. You train yourself to be emotionally discerning, a calm presence within the social matrix. How? You subtly manage your facial micro-expressions to convey a steady presence. You anchor your gaze not directly into people's eyes, but gently past them, subtly removing yourself from their immediate emotional current. You deepen your breathing into your diaphragm, allowing your voice to remain calm, steady, and unhurried. These aren't deceptive tricks, they're neurological practices. Because once your nervous system stops simply echoing others, you become more psychologically anchored. You can walk into a chaotic room and maintain your inner composure. You can hear distress in someone's voice, and your own pulse remains steady. You can witness emotional outbursts, and your thoughts remain clear, composed, and sharp. This isn't about becoming robotic. It's about reclaiming your mental spaciousness. The person who absorbs every feeling is easily swayed, but the one who can feel without absorbing, that person cultivates a profound inner stillness. You weren't born to be merely a reflection. You were born to be a conscious filter. Once you practice this empathetic resonance control, the world's noise no longer dictates your inner state. You don't just adapt to the room, you can calmly influence its atmosphere. 6. Foundational understanding refinement. You believe you see the world, but what you actually perceive is often a landscape of pre-installed language, words, meanings, definitions downloaded into your mind before you could even question them. You were told what success is, what love means, what failure, confidence, or even reality itself should look like. But here's the quiet truth. Most people aren't living in the world as it is. They're living inside a constructed reality built by others' expectations, their parents, their culture, past experiences, or society's anxieties disguised as values. You don't always see what is. You see what you were taught to see. That's why the discerning mind initiates a deliberate refinement of foundational understanding. It's precise, almost surgical. You question every inherited definition until it reveals its underlying structure. You don't just redefine success, you explore what contribution or impact truly mean to you. Career becomes focused purpose. Confidence transforms into inner composure under evolving conditions. Failure becomes tactical feedback for learning. Love becomes a shared experience and intentional connection. Truth becomes what remains after every assumption has been gently examined. You no longer simply adopt reality. You consciously build your understanding of it, concept by concept. And here's what happens when this refinement is complete. Your mind stops merely reacting to old symbols. It no longer lights up with automatic approval, guilt, or shame, because those were responses tied to a past understanding that no longer fully holds. Now, you respond with intentional design. You interpret with precision. You act with an internal logic, not just inherited beliefs. You are not just playing society's game. You are thoughtfully constructing your own framework, with principles that align with your deepest purpose, not just tradition. This isn't rebellion. It's conscious recalibration. Once your internal operating system is clearer, every concept becomes a tool. Every meaning becomes personally defined, and reality finally becomes more openly explored. 7th, perceptual insight. Most people observe the world passively. Their eyes take in information, but their mind remains largely reactive. You, however, can train your vision into a strategic tool. Because here's the often overlooked insight. The world doesn't run solely on facts. It runs on frames of understanding. The person who can thoughtfully frame a situation often guides the outcome. If you can clarify what's being seen, you can influence how others feel. And if you can help shape what they feel, you can gently guide their actions. This is perceptual clarity, not by speaking louder, but by observing more deeply. You learn to speak only after noticing subtle facial cues, breath rhythms, shifts in posture, observing where their attention truly lies, where their comfort might waver, or where their initial stance might be. Instead of reacting, you anchor your presence. You maintain a stillness so composed it becomes grounding. Movement often chases attention. Stillness can invite it. Then, you aim your questions not just at their words, but at the unstated context. You ask the questions they might be avoiding. You reflect their underlying emotions back to them, not with judgment, but as an observation. You don't necessarily confront, you reveal. You become a clear lens, not just a mirror. They don't just see themselves in you, they see themselves more clearly because of you. And that's when everything shifts. Your calm presence begins to influence the atmosphere of the room. People speak more thoughtfully. They adjust their posture. They might explain things they normally wouldn't, simply to feel truly understood. This isn't just about presence, it's about perceptual effectiveness. When others feel a quiet acknowledgement in your presence, you don't have to assert power. They naturally become more open. Once you can clarify the frame, you don't just follow reality, you contribute to shaping it. 8. Focused action. Thinking. The average person sometimes feels like they waste time, not necessarily because they're lazy, but because they subtly believe there's an endless supply. They act as if time is a constantly renewable currency, as if the future will always stretch far enough to compensate for today's delays. But here's the truth. Time doesn't just run out. It often collapses quietly, sometimes unexpectedly. The discerning mind doesn't live in years. It lives in deliberate cycles of clarity and execution that build into significant progress. You don't ask, how much time do I have? You ask, how many cycles can I complete before a key outcome is needed? Your day becomes a series of choices. Every task gets 2 options: execute with focus, or thoughtfully set it aside for now. No lengthy negotiation, no emotional hesitation. You either build or you choose to release. Conversations are filtered through a lens of precision. Does this build understanding? Does this reveal clarity? Does this redirect momentum constructively? If not, you calmly let it go before it drains your energy. You stop attending meetings that don't advance a goal. You stop debating ideas that don't shift outcomes. You stop over-explaining yourself to people who only listen to reaffirm their own perspectives. Because you no longer operate just on clock time. You operate on mental effectiveness per moment. This is how a nimble mind can achieve more than one with vast experience, not by accumulating more data, but by compressing the distance between thought and meaningful outcome. You don't just move faster, you streamline the path. You don't panic, you prioritize with clear intent. While others are still caught in monthly goals and 5-year plans, you're iterating decisions, extracting insights, and adapting even mid-conversation. This isn't just activity, it's temporal awareness. You are condensing time into purposeful action. And when you do that, you quietly influence outcomes at a pace most people perceive as profound insight. 9. Intentional self-cultivation. You were told to be yourself, but often no one explained that yourself is an evolving project, not a fixed discovery. The average person sometimes drifts through life, waiting to find who they are. The truly effective individual designs who they aspire to become. Because identity isn't just a soul, it's a dynamic strategy in motion. You are not a fixed self, you are a response system, and responses can be intentionally refined. You begin by asking, what qualities foster understanding before miscommunication arises? What tone invites openness rather than defensiveness? What demeanor transforms critique into shared learning? What presence encourages thoughtful engagement rather than snap judgments? You move beyond simply identifying with your past. You stop merely defending your default personality. You realize your current self was partly shaped by circumstance, childhood, experiences, social feedback loops. Now, you build with purpose. You don't just ask, who am I? You ask, what qualities support effectiveness in this environment? And then you thoughtfully cultivate those qualities. Perhaps you need to cultivate more composure, or refine your sense of humor, or ensure clarity in your voice, or bring more focused energy to your interactions. This isn't about being inauthentic, it's about being skillfully tailored. You're not here just to express your raw self. You're here to thoughtfully engage the most effective version of yourself in the dynamic environment you inhabit. You become someone who walks into a room and subtly influences the emotional algorithm simply by maintaining your composure. No wasted movements, no unnecessary words, no fragmented energy. You are no longer merely reacting to the world, you are refining your interface with it. Because when your identity is cultivated with purpose, you don't just navigate challenges, you contribute to shaping the game itself. By now, your mind has absorbed many new perspectives. But insight is invaluable only if it holds under pressure. When you're tired, when you're misunderstood, when you're underestimated, or when chaos unfolds. This next part of the process doesn't just sharpen your mind, it strengthens it into a resilient tool that stays effective under pressure. This is where insight becomes unwavering. 10. Cognitive flexibility. Most people tend to engage in straightforward ways. Their logic is linear, their arguments predictable, their reactions often rehearsed. And that's why they sometimes find themselves stuck, not because they lack intelligence, but because they operate with cognitive rigidity. This rigidity limits strategic advantage. It places you on the same ground as everyone else, with similar assumptions, a similar pace, and shared blind spots. But the truly insightful mind doesn't play that game. It thinks with flexibility. It explores logic from different angles. It can use quiet moments strategically. When others speak, you might pause. When they press, you might strategically yield. When they expect a direct rebuttal, you might offer a thoughtful question. Cognitive flexibility means you don't just react as expected. You don't rigidly adhere to emotional rules others understand. Instead of arguing facts, you might ask a question that broadens their perspective. Instead of defending yourself, you might reframe the entire discussion. Instead of trying to win a point, you gently shift the context in which that point exists. They might say, "You're mistaken." You might respond, "What would need to be true for that to shift?" Now, they have to define the conditions. Now, they are engaging with your frame. This isn't about mere debate, it's about neurological reorientation. The most skilled participant isn't the one with the most force. It's the one whose rhythm can't be easily anticipated, whose moves aren't just direct answers, but open up new possibilities. You might respond later, but you influence the tempo. You remain composed, but you can subtly shift perception. By the time others recognize you're operating on a different level, the opportunity has already shifted. You didn't directly oppose them. You invited them to see things differently. That's not just intelligence, it's subtle influence. 11th, responsive. Calm cultivation. Stress doesn't just reveal you, it can subtly reshape you. Under pressure, your voice might tighten, your breath shorten, your thoughts fragment. You start responding from immediate instinct rather than thoughtful insight, from apprehension rather than structure, from raw survival rather than conscious strategy. Most minds might falter in a crisis, not because they're fragile, but because they were never truly guided on how to think under heightened circumstances. This isn't about suppressing feelings. It's about cultivating a resilient nervous system before it overtakes your clear thinking. The refined mind intentionally cultivates calm responses. As pressure rises, slower breathing tells your body, we're not just reacting, we're choosing. During a challenging interaction, using third-person self-dialogue, replacing "I'm under attack" with "he's analyzing the situation," creates a psychological space that enhances clarity. A 5-second pause through temporal separation. When strong emotion arises, you don't suppress it. You gently acknowledge it, and then pause before acting. In those crucial few seconds, others might speak too soon, make a misstep, or reveal their own hesitation. And you? You thoughtfully reposition. You're not suppressing your initial reaction. You're redirecting it into refinement. While others might expend energy reacting, you convert pressure into focused processing power. This is how you can perform effectively even amidst chaos, not with more data, but with better response timing under evolving conditions. You don't just endure stress, you learn from it. Pressure becomes your sharpening stone, each challenging moment, another opportunity for calibration, each surge of urgency, another practice drill. When it becomes a natural part of your process, you don't fear challenging situations. You see them as opportunities for growth. While others strive to avoid breaking, you aim to recenter faster than they can think. And in that precise gap, you gain clarity and effectiveness. 12th, intentional stillness. Most people speak to fill space, to prove their presence, or to ease their own discomfort with silence. But here's the quiet truth. Constant noise often reveals underlying unease. Intentional stillness reveals composure. We're often taught that intelligence sounds like quick words, rapid facts, or a dominant tone. But true intelligence doesn't just express, it distills. The refined mind speaks in thoughtful reductions, and between those reductions is purposeful stillness. Not passive, not empty, but precisely woven into the interaction. Each pause becomes a subtle psychological anchor. It can gently shift the listener's rhythm, allow them to process their assumptions, and encourage them to absorb. And while they process, you thoughtfully guide the flow. This isn't silence for placidity, it's stillness for conscious influence. You don't answer instantly, you thoughtfully pace the exchange. You adjust the cadence of the conversation. In that subtle shift, their mind has a moment to settle, allowing your subsequent words to land with greater precision. No unnecessary words, no excess buildup, just core insight. One sentence of distilled information. One pause for mental integration. One thoughtful glance for mutual understanding. You're not just speaking, you're influencing the cognitive rhythm. Because thought that arrives too late is reactive, defensive, and less impactful. But thought that arrives with considered timing, that's insightful, precise, and strategically effective. Stillness becomes your refined tool, a way to gently slow the world down until everyone else is moving with a natural pace and you are subtly shaping the flow. You don't just seek attention, you help refocus it. And once stillness becomes a tool, your presence becomes a source of clarity and impact. If you've engaged with these insights so far, you're not just scrolling for distraction. You're seeking mental clarity, psychological insight, and practical tools the world often doesn't teach. But here's the crucial point. Understanding these 12 principles isn't enough, because knowing them won't change your reality. Integrating them will. So here's your next step. In the comments below, share which insight resonated with you most deeply. Not for external validation, but for internal integration. What you name becomes more real. What you apply begins to reshape your understanding. If this discussion activated something meaningful within you, consider sharing it with someone who might also benefit from new ways of thinking, someone who needs to explore beyond conventional perspectives.